Hello, team.
Hey, Daniel.
Oh my gosh, what a setup. I love it. It's so cool.
All right, I think we are all set. Hey everyone, hello and welcome to another episode of the Millionaire Insiders show, where we sit with other successful entrepreneurs and business owners to learn more about their journey, their story, their struggles, and what has really helped them to build their multi-million-dollar empire. Today, we actually have a true fighter, true fighter on our show, both in and out of the ring. Yes, we are talking about Daniel. Daniel is the founder of the six-figure Fit Pro University and an expert in online fitness coaching and sales, and a man who knows a thing or two about resilience and perseverance. So we would like to know more about Daniel. So without further ado, let's welcome Daniel to our Millionaire Insider show. Hey Daniel, how are you doing?
Hey, team. Pleasure to be on here.
Let's dive
For
a
sure.
little bit more into the past and tell us about who you were.
Yeah, I mean, like the contrast compared to who I am and where I am now compared to where I was, 10, 20 years ago is incomparable. Like it's almost unfathomable. And I know that the people that I used to hang out with back in the day, they would look at me now and they wouldn't really be able to recognize me in the way that I sort of like articulate sentences. And I was quite illiterate back in the day, and not very, I was kind of switched on, but nowhere near to the level that I am today. And I think that's a testament to all the mentorship programs that I've invested into and how much focus I've actually applied to business and entrepreneurship. But a bit of a backstory. So I grew up in Sydney, Australia. And the only reason why we moved there is because when my dad was 14 years old, he basically grew up inside of the Brethren Church, which is a religious cult where you're not allowed to watch TV or listen to music or associate with anybody outside of this religious cult. Otherwise, basically, you go to hell. So my dad used to get, beaten up by my grandfather every day, locked in the room. When he was 14 years old, he jumped out of his bedroom window, slept in a park for 2 weeks. The police found him in the park and said, "Hey, we're going to bring you back to your parents' house." He said, "I don't want to do that." So he ended up staying with a friend for a couple of years, ended up meeting my mum when he was working at the pizza shop. My dad and my mum both changed their names. They wanted to change their identity. My mum had a really bad past as well. Then they moved to Australia to start a new life and had myself and my brother. And so when I was 14 years old, my grandparents, they actually tracked down my dad after all those years and told my dad that the church had forgiven him for his sins. And they basically put together $60,000 for a deposit on a house for us to move back to New Zealand. And so we ended up moving back to New Zealand, trying to fit into a school where, everyone grew up when they were younger, and it was quite a rough area. So it was quite difficult to sort of try to find acceptance in that environment. But yeah, I started boxing from the age of 14 years old. I was playing rugby league up until the point of from 5 till 14. When I moved to New Zealand, all the guys were just massive, like big Tongan guys with like beards and moustaches at 14 years old. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. So that boxing was really good. I did that for about 8 years. And so one night I was preparing for a fight. I was at a tournament warming up in the back room, and my dad pulled me outside and told me that my mother had passed away. So she had emphysema for about 8 years, and it was quite sudden. And I spent the next sort of year or two just drowning myself in drugs and alcohol to suppress my emotions, because I couldn't, I guess, deal with the coming to terms with what had happened. My mum was actually a world-class bodybuilder, world champion bodybuilder back in the day. So about 3 weeks after my mum had passed away, my boxing trainer had basically let go of me after a really bad performance on my end. And so I made it a mission of mine to get on a bodybuilding stage in memory of my mum. At the time, I was 22 years old and I was 52 kilos, which is like the size of a 10-year-old. So, I did all that work. I ended up getting a coach, and, inside of that process, I became really obsessed about nutrition. So that led to me studying nutrition. I became a sports science nutritionist. I ended up getting a job inside of a gym, got 0 clients because all of the personal trainers would offer nutritional programming in their PT packages. And then one day I'm scrolling on Facebook and I see an ad by Lynn Trin, who's basically, saying, hey, I can help you grow an online fitness business, pulled me in. And he basically said to me that the investment was going to be $8,000. I couldn't afford it. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, like, what are you going to do, Dan? At the time, I was working for my dad's furniture installation company on next to minimum wage. I really hated it. It was such a bad environment. And so what I did was I sold my lounge room furniture. I sold my TV. I got a $6,000 loan. I rang him back up 2 weeks later and I said, let's do it. And from that point, I just have never looked back. And I think the biggest driving factor was the fear and the pain of like going back to working for my dad's company, because it was just like the most unfulfilling job in the world, like in my eyes anyway. And once I tasted a piece of success, I think the pain of going back to working for my dad was far greater than the pain of actually, pushing through the resistance and doing what it takes to win. So I ended up blowing up that fitness business quite well. I had about over 445 clients at one point, working with mothers, and I was basically sharing my mum's story with the mums that I was coaching. It was all based around self-love. 2.5 years later, I let go of that company to build Cash Clock Academy to teach other fitness coaches how to grow their business as well. And last year in August of 2022, I decided to sell the company. There's a few reasons for that. I think we grew very, very quickly. We rolled out a done for you offer, and we had explosive growth. We were charging 22K USD for our services. And don't get me wrong, we were getting great results for our clients, but something just didn't feel right where, some of these clients would come in and they'd be in a place of scarcity before they even started. On top of that, you got software and obviously you got ad spend, etc. So I decided to sell that company and start Fit Pro University to basically teach these coaches that, you don't have to invest 10 to 20K into a mastermind to learn the systems and processes to grow. So at the moment, I'm just trying to pull off the impossible. I'm trying to, build a quality coaching program that delivers world-class results where I'm still able to hire a team to be able to, coach on different areas of copywriting and marketing and sales, etc. And yeah, here we are today.
So you mentioned your grandpa used to beat your dad up and stuff, and he was in crazy Jesus cult or whatever. Did this rub off in your childhood? I mean, did your dad do any of this? Did that abusiveness come down the line where your dad also abused you? Carry any of this crazy Jesus stuff with you in his upbringing to you?
He definitely didn't carry the Jesus stuff. When he ran away from the church at 14, he was like very rebellious. So he did basically every drug under the sun. He was graffitiing on the church. He actually told me a story of him going to the movies for the very first time at 14 years old with his friends who weren't in the church, because back then the schools were, brethrens and non-brethrens. And he was watching the commercials before the movie started, and the commercials had ended. My dad thought that was the movie. So he's just like mind blown. His friends are laughing, saying, the movie hasn't even started yet. But no, he told me, he wouldn't go back to the church for $1 million. I said, why is that? He's like, what am I going to spend it on? Can't watch TV, can't do anything. I'll buy a piano. That's about it. But yeah, my dad was like never abusive towards me. Like he was very like hard on me, I guess. Like when I was younger, if I did something that he didn't like, he'd definitely like give me a whack. He wouldn't just say, you're in timeout for 10 minutes sort of thing. But I always grew up respecting my dad. I never grew up sort of fearing my dad. And in hindsight now, looking back, I've got a lot of respect for my mum and my dad for how they raised me based on their past as well. Like my mum got raped by her dad at 12 years old. She ran away, and she's got a bit of a crazy story as well. Hence why, she changed her first name too. And probably hence why she started bodybuilding as well, because she had so much, pent up anger and frustration. But yeah, I'm very grateful for how they raised me. I think they did a great job.
So what motivated you to decide that you wanted to start going and punching people in the face?
Well, I just sort of fell into it because I was going to continue doing rugby league as I had done since 5 years old in Australia. But when I moved to New Zealand, the guys over here are just like full on beards and moustaches at 14 years old. They're about 6'8" at 15 years old. And I'm like, man, I'm only 5'5" right now, And at the time I was probably about 45 kilos when I was, 14 years old. So I knew I was just going to get crumbled. So I just decided to do boxing because it seemed fair. It's all in weight divisions and stuff like that. So yeah, and just one thing led to another. But when I first moved to that area, I used to get bullied like a lot. Just, I guess, trying to fit in Australia. I was kind of like popular. I knew everyone in school and was in a band. You know, I used to play every Friday at school and stuff. So it was just quite difficult for me to fit in. And I found myself sort of doing things that I wouldn't usually do in an attempt to be liked by the people in that neighborhood. For instance, like graffitiing and, you know, starting to smoke weed and smoking cigarettes when I was 14. And my dad just got sick of it. When I was 16 years old, I was playing PlayStation in my room one day and he walked in and said, Dan, we can't control you. We got a one-way ticket back to Australia for you. You leave in a week. And so basically he set me up with a job through the Brethren's, like, you know, through family and stuff like that. So I had 1 week's notice. I ended up living with an old primary school friend and his mum, which didn't last very long because they found out I was smoking weed over there. But yeah, I lived over there for about 2 years and ended up having a massive mental breakdown and, you know, went into overdraft massively and sort of was on the payphone to my dad, bawling my eyes out, begging for him to take me back. And he did. And I used to resent my parents for sending me to Australia by myself at such a young age. But when I came back, I had so much respect for them for doing that, because it sort of, not only did it force me out of that environment that was very toxic and sort of drag me down, but it sort of helped me grow up as well and sort of, you know, have more independence for myself.
You mentioned that you got messed up with the wrong crowds, and you also, you know, like slept on the street. So like,
Yeah, I had one girlfriend in Australia. I was basically like house hopping from one friend's place to another once I got kicked out from the first place that I was planning on staying at the whole time I was in Australia. But I had a girlfriend. I moved in with her and her mum. And one day I came home and all my stuff was thrown out in the street. She told me she didn't want to be with me anymore. And so basically I slept on the street for about a week and a half at a primary school, just underneath one of the shelters. And during the day, I would just sort of hang out like around Burger King and around like the city center. And then what happened was, after about a week and a half, I went back to the apartment building where I lived with my now ex-girlfriend. And across the hallway, there were these like junkies. They were just like maybe 45 years old. They just smoked weed all day, every day. So I knocked on their door and asked if I could just stay there for a night. And I ended up staying there for about 3 weeks. My parents ended up coming over for a holiday to surprise me over in Sydney, and they saw the state that I was living in with these junkies. And my mum like has like no filter. She's just like, you fucking pigs, how can you live like this? And, you know, they're like, Dan, we're going to take you back to New Zealand. And I was like, no, I wanted to prove to them that I could be independent. I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I want to stay here. I'm doing just fine. But yeah, that didn't last long when I broke down on the payphone to my dad.
So do you now subscribe to any type of religious beliefs or anything?
I don't subscribe to. No, I'm definitely not an atheist. Yeah, I don't really have. Oh yeah, I'm not very religious, but I do believe in like some sort of higher power, I guess. I don't have any specific like religious beliefs around like, you know, Buddhism or Christianity and stuff. I guess because I've never really been exposed to that sort of stuff. But I do believe there's something bigger than our physical existence in this one life, for sure.
To some extent, but they don't even have a way of living. There's not a specific way that you have to live. Okay, so for example, like one of the concepts in Buddhism is there's no place that you should be, right? You just are. Yeah. So you are where you are where you're at, not because you should be there, but you just are there. So it's a very free, open-minded type of religion. So I'm also not a Buddhist, but I think that's one of the closest. So did you fight professionally or something?
I did like semi-professional boxing. I did like some corporate fights and stuff like that, but never went to the professional level. There was a bit of a break in between boxing when I got sent to Australia when I was 16. But prior to that, I was doing really, really well. And I sort of like have a little bit of regret that if I just had have stuck it out, because when I came back from Australia, back to New Zealand 2.5 years later, I saw all of the guys that I used to beat, and now they're, you know, fighting junior world championships in Dubai and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, man, now they're light years ahead of me. You know, there's like very hard to catch up with those guys who have been, you know, boxing since they were 12 and never had a break, you know. At the end of the day, I'm grateful for everything, because I wouldn't be in this position that I am right now had I not have gone through even the shitty things. I think that would have built some sort of grit and resilience and humbleness and humility inside of me. And the way that I treat people as well, I've been treated like shit in the past. So I'm always aware of how I'm speaking to people and how they're going to perceive it as well. I think that's just embedded into me right now. But that's like a weakness of mine as well, especially when it comes to hiring and firing. You know, I'll hold on to hope and be like, man, this guy's a really good dude. I'm sure he's going to improve. And I'll hold on for maybe a little bit too long in the past. So there's definitely some areas that I need to work on in that department for sure.
You understand this whole concept of like the entrepreneurial spirit and the entrepreneurial mindset. Do you feel this is something that you've always had as long as you can remember?
I think I've always had some kind of entrepreneurial spirit inside of me, because when I was in primary school, I used to sell these they're called slammers. You get them in like a packet of chips, but you get like rare ones. And these things called crazy bones. And I used to sell marbles at school, and you'd get like these rare crazy bones that's like 1 in 100. And I remember kids would save up their lunch money to buy my crystal crazy bone. It's not real crystal, but it's just like a very rare one, and especially in primary school. Like I remember that point, I was always like selling marbles and gambling with marbles and selling crazy bones and slammers and all these things. But I think ever since I got introduced to my very first mentor, and he was a great mentor, especially in terms of discipline and work ethic and really shifting my perspective around the majority of the population. And I don't know what it was, but it just lit a fire inside of me.
Were there any character traits that you actually had to adopt? That's what I guess Jon was more like asking, like what are those character traits that you had to adopt to become the entrepreneur or to build this business? So like, were there any character traits that you had to adopt, or you always had this inside you?
I think the biggest thing was overcoming the fear of judgment when it came to putting myself out there online, especially considering the fact that I was working with mothers, and I myself, I'm a 5 foot white dude from New Zealand. So I used to get a lot of hate on ads from, other mums being like, he's not a mum. What would he know? This is sexist, yada, yada. And so I knew that there was a person that I needed to mold into in order to pull off that kind of result. So what I did was I unfollowed everybody on Facebook and Instagram. And I created a YouTube channel where I just upload one video a day privately, but nobody could see it. And I'd just be like practicing the message, practicing my speaking skills. Because in the beginning, I was an absolute robot, no tonality whatsoever, definitely no conviction or certainty in who I was. And I think that gets reinforced, positive reinforcement that comes from, the results and the feedback that you get from clients. It sort of feeds into more confidence and more conviction. Whereas the paradox to that is inaction just breeds lower confidence and lower levels of conviction. So I think it's just like courage, courage to put yourself out there and the courage to believe that you can pull off something that somebody else can.
Did it seem hard for you to have that courage?
Yeah,
even though you spent time punching people in the face? I used to box, I did taekwondo, I did karate, jiu-jitsu. I've been to jail more times than I can count on my fingers. So I used to rob people, do drugs. I have like a very, very similar past to yours, where my parents were deep into a religious cult themselves. Except for, my dad was the actual abusive one, yes. raping my mom, and actually he killed my sister's baby whenever my sister was pregnant, because she got raped. So that led to a lot of substance abuse, a lot of drugs, and then I just had this chip on my shoulder all the time. So I was just always out looking for a fight. So whenever you get in fights, there's always obviously the possibility that you are the one getting punched in the face versus doing the punching. So it takes a kind of, a different mindset, obviously, to get into a physical altercation. So do you think it was still hard for you to put yourself out there?
Yeah, the reason why I got into boxing in the first place was, obviously, because when I first moved to New Zealand, I got jumped by about 12 guys. I was with 2 of my friends. Back then we were all into graffitiing and tagging and stuff like that. We stayed in my friend's dad's caravan, And when it hit midnight, we'd all like load up our backpack full of cans. And one night we're walking through like the main township in this area in New Zealand, bad area. And there was about 12 guys drinking at the bus stop. And so they chased us and they just beat the absolute shit out of us. But those were the only people in the neighborhood that you could really be friends with. The gang, surprisingly, was called Respect or Surrender. They beat the living shit out of me, and I went to boxing, and that gave me a lot of confidence. But I think it all came down to what you were saying, like having this chip on my shoulder of I don't want to be that person that gets bullied, and it really that sort of survival mode, that fight or flight. Because for the next like 12 months after that moment, I was always running in and out of shops. Like my dad would pull up to the shop, and instead of walking into the shop to get something and come back to the car, I would sort of jog into the shop and then jog back to the car just in case like someone was out to jump me again. So I think I had a little bit of paranoia for about 12 months after that, especially up until the point of, moving away from New Zealand, which is why I'm so grateful my parents actually sent me away, because who knows where I would have ended up, if I had stayed there. It was just horrible, like seeing guys at parties just getting like slapped and bullied, even though they're like the boys, people stealing from each other, the friends fighting each other when they're drunk. It was just a shitty environment to be in. I would never go back to that area. It brings back some really dark memories. I feel like I've like overcome it, but I don't want to, open up that can of worms again. You know what I mean?
I think this is really powerful because I think there's a big similarity between this toxic environment of, hey, I have to get out of this environment because the shit around me is so toxic. There's a very big similarity, I think, between that and entrepreneurship, because what I see a lot is you have these young entrepreneurs or these people who are trying to be entrepreneurs and trying to go on this path, but they don't want to leave that environment. Although that environment may not be toxic, they may not be around people who are drug addicts and who are drinking all the time, but they're trying to basically do the same thing. They're trying to basically rise up out of that, but they don't want to leave their environment, meaning they still want to have the same friends that they've always had. They still want to hang out with the same crowd that they've always had, and they don't realize that, okay, hey, if I want to go a different path, I'm going to have to leave these people behind because they're not on the same path as me, and they're going to try, just like those people in the gangs. You fucking can't be around a bunch of people in the gangs doing drugs and then go be a fucking banker, really, because if you are a banker, they're gonna try to tell you need to rob the fucking bank for us, is what they're going to do.
If you want to get better in life, then you also have to put yourself in better situation. You cannot just get better by staying in the same place or the same situation. So if you are surrounding yours, like you are just living in the same situation, like with other drug addicts or in a toxic environment, then obviously you are putting those things in your mind, and you are also going to have those traits like, okay, I cannot leave, like I'm not gonna leave, I'm still gonna live in this toxic environment, and then at some point of time you're not gonna be able to do the things that you actually wanted to do in your life. So if you want to be better, and just change your situation, change your current situation, and then see what happens.
For sure. I see that with a lot of young kids as well, where like even their parents can be one of the biggest detriments to their success by limiting them. And, they want to be proud of their kids, and obviously they've got the best intentions for their kids, but sometimes their advice is very outdated, like you have to go to university, you have to buy a house and pay off a mortgage, and all these beliefs that are passed down from generations, where a lot of the times those things are outdated.
It's actually not still outdated. I mean, the country that I live in, it's India. It's still today, parents actually forces us to go to college and get this education. Still today, it's not a choice for us. In your guys' country, I know from Jon, like
We're not from the same country.
Right, okay. But still, like I know
he's from New Zealand, which is really close to the prison colony.
He lives in Bali. He lives in Bali right now with his girlfriend or wife, I'm guessing, but I have seen his pictures and videos. But what I was trying to get into is still don't have to get to decide, hey, I don't want to go to college for the next 2 or 3, 4 years, and I want to figure out my own life and then see what happens. And then maybe if I decide I want to get the degree, then I can get the degree. But
when did you move to Bali?
Nearly 1 year. Yeah, so it's going to be 1 year next month. It's so bloody awesome. I was so unfulfilled in New Zealand. It just felt like just perpetual boredom. Just every day, wake up, get a coffee, go to work, go to the gym, come home, dinner, sleep, wake up. And I guess I was just sick of the same atmosphere, the same environment every single day. I think I've also got like borderline ADHD. So it's like, it's really hard for me to stay in one house for like longer than 6 to 12 months. I need to move. I need to like change the environment. Otherwise I just feel very, very bored. And I fall into this like place of unfulfillment. I don't know if that's a healthy place to be, but yeah, I've had that for the last maybe like 4 to 5 years where it's so hard for me to settle in one place. I do love Bali though. It's like, best way to describe it would be like organized chaos. There's people that drink drive and there's no people to breathalyze you. It's like, if you crash, like hopefully you learn your lesson, you know? But yeah, they'll pick on the tourists though. I mean, you know, if you don't have a helmet, they'll try and get some money out of you. And if you don't have any money, they'll make you do like 50 push-ups or something like that, just to try and get you to do something. Yeah, but it's awesome.
I've got a friend that lives over there that's also
Fitness,
a big fitness guy. I can introduce you, and he's from Perth, actually. So
oh wow.
And I'd love if you actually sent me some fucking avocado coffee. So they make that really good avocado coffee over there. But what's your cost of living like in Bali versus in Australia?
Well, the cost of food and, you know, food and drink and groceries and petrol is very cheap. Over the last 3 months, the rent prices here have absolutely skyrocketed, maybe like double or triple what they were, you know, last year in July, August. So, you know, the rent that I was paying when I first moved was about $1,500 a month. And now it's about $4,200 a month for the same place.
$4,200 or? Yeah,
$4,200 a month. Yeah. But it was $1,500 last year for the same place.
Are you living in a mansion or something?
No. It's just a normal two bedroom villa, open living with a little pool.
What part of Bali? What part of Bali are you in?
It's in Umalas, right next to Seminyak. Not happy about the rapid increase in prices.
Right, but did it actually decrease your cost of living versus you used to have when you were living in New Zealand?
Yeah, I think overall it's still definitely cheaper than living in New Zealand. New Zealand's crazy. I mean, just like the inflation rate is just going through the roof. And it's I think that the government's very, very strict in New Zealand and Australia. I'm not too sure what it's like in the US and stuff like that, but yeah, it's getting pretty out of control. I mean, the Prime Minister was getting so much hate in New Zealand that she ended up stepping down.
That's one of the things I like to preach to people, that if your job's remote, if you work completely remote and you're not actually physically required to go to a place, and most entrepreneurs aren't, that you should really check into some Asian country, some, underdeveloped country, because what ends up happening, like, okay, hey, let's say if I live in the US and I live in California, what I call, OCI, the minimum cost that you actually need to survive, to have a food, a roof over your head. And in California, it could be, let's say, like $10K. And you're going to, let's say you have a mediocre standard of living, let's just say a 5. Your standard of living, your happiness index is a 5. Well, what ends up happening if you go to a place like Bali, or if you go to a place like Phuket or Thailand, or even if you leave Bali and you go to one of the other little Indonesian islands, which are a lot cheaper because it's not a tourist hub, then what ends up happening is you end up going from an OCI of $10,000 a month, minimum cost of living to have a happiness index of 5, to about anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 a month is now your new OCI, but your happiness index goes to a 7 or an 8. So your standard of living actually increases, but your costs go down. So all things considered, we're going to assume that you have the same amount of revenue, because if you had 10K over there in California, we're going to assume that you still have the 10K over there wherever you moved. But now you have an increased standard of living, which is what everybody wants anyways, and you have a decreased cost. So in this instance, you have anywhere from $7,000 to $4,000 in additional capital every single month while your standard of living went up, and you can actually use that to begin to invest into your long-term future. And so not doing it, I think not doing that is just so stupid for people who can actually live remote, because it's like, look, if you're the dude in the US and your income is 10K and your minimum cost of living is 10K, you have no fucking future. There's no future because you have no way to actually have excess capital to invest in yourself. And if you do get excess capital, if you do get to that 12K a month, what are you going to do? Because you're a fucking human, you're probably going to want to actually increase your cost of living, your standard of living. But if you go over here to Asia, then okay, you can increase your standard of living, you don't have to increase your revenue, and you still have like 50% of your money that you can begin to invest for your long-term future.
For sure. I definitely agree with that. I spent so many years in New Zealand with the thought of wanting to leave the country, but it felt like this weird invisible chain between me and my desk in New Zealand. Maybe because the idea was just so foreign to me. But then when I finally bit the bullet and decided to move, man, looking back in hindsight, I'm so damn glad I did. It was the best decision ever. And I still get to see my dad. I went to New Zealand last year. He's come over to visit me twice now. So, I mean, my dad and I are like best mates these days. So it's cool that we still get to see each other as well, because he's probably the only person that I go back to see, to be honest, and my brother.
So are you doing any type of Muay Thai or anything while you're over there?
I'm doing a bit of boxing with my girlfriend, but it's nothing serious. It's just pad work and
like real boxing, cool. Or you just like, are you doing like real boxing?
No, we're just on the pads with one another. And also we just go to the gym together, maybe like 5 days a week. But I went for a back procedure in December. Didn't solve the problem. I went for another back procedure 2 weeks ago for a nucleoplasty procedure where they put the injection right where my L5-S1 is. It was horrible, man. So I'm just going through this recovery process right now for the next 6 weeks. I've got to wear this uncomfortable belt, take these anti-inflams twice a day. So I'm just taking it easy. I'm just trying to be as productive as possible, to be honest, through this recovery phase so that I don't lose the plot. Because I got to do something.
So what these guys always want is a blueprint. They want a step-by-step process. How do I go to $1 million in revenue?
Yeah, I mean, you have built your multi-million-dollar online empire within 4 years or so. Do you have any advice for the entrepreneurs who wants to scale their business quickly and get to that mark? I
think the harsh reality is that no one's going to get there fast. And I think having that expectation is just going to completely ruin their reality. Obviously, mastering the message and being able to articulate that with conviction and specificity, and also mastering obviously like the fundamentals of, copywriting and advertising and marketing and tracking and measuring data, hiring and managing teams, sales, appointment setting, all of those skill sets where I used to look at old mentorship programs. And if I invested with them and I didn't get, this 6-figure business, I'd be pissed off and I'd blame the mentor or blame the system or anything outside of myself to validate, my own lack of success, where I didn't realize that like I was investing not in my business, but I was investing in myself into acquiring and mastering skill sets. So as that journey goes on, you get better and better with these skill sets, and it becomes autonomous. It just becomes second nature. But I'd say that, if the goal is to, hit the first 10K month or even go to 50K a month, it's number one, it's about, obviously niching down and positioning yourself in the marketplace as the expert. And we do that by articulating the marketing message in such detail where your ideal client would look at you and say, oh my gosh, how does he or she know me so well? They're speaking my life. Even like demonstrating vulnerability and throwing yourself under the bus to show your ideal clients that you're actually a real person and to connect with them on a deeper level. And so once we have that, I would create some sort of free resource that's like actually valuable and actually gets them results for free. And what I would do is I would run detailed ads with that free lead magnet, and I'd be putting that lead magnet directly in front of the people that need to see it the most. Again, articulating their message of what they're going through, what they're frustrated with, what their pains and fears and frustrations are, what their objections and desires are. And then obviously I'd give them this free valuable piece in exchange for their name and email address. So now I've got their contact details. And then once they're inside of our conversion mechanism, there's a whole range of different things that we can do here. We can do like a mini VSL. We can drive them into ManyChat. There's got to be some sort of conversion mechanism to take them from a lead into, a call booked inside of the calendar. I mean, I've run just about every single acquisition system out there. But yeah, I mean, in simple terms, it's just like, niche down, obviously be able to articulate the offer in such fine detail, put that ad with a free resource directly in front of that person with something that's actually valuable and that's in alignment to the biggest problem that that person's wanting to solve. If they give you their name and email address, that means that they're showing some sort of interest in what you're offering them, which means that there's some sort of interest in solving that problem. And then once you've got them inside of your world, there's obviously like nurture and follow up. So not just relying on, direct response marketing and getting a call booked today, but, having a nurture process in place, but then also having some sort of like call to action once they do enter their name and email address for the people that do want to take the next step and resonate with your message and want to solve that problem immediately. Because, people need to see a message over and over and over again for a lot of people before they decide to pull the trigger, and other people are just ready to go now. I've joined mentorship programs in the past where I've seen their ad that same night, booked in a call, never knew who they were, but the copy was just so compelling. The webinar was just flawless. I was aware I could feel myself getting sold to, and I was like, I love it. As a marketer, I'm like, I love this. It's perfect. I'm like, this is what I want for my audience.
Your main offer now and the main thing that you sell is to actually help other people in the fitness area grow their business?
Yes, correct. And I think the marketplace...
With paid ads?
Paid ads, yes. We do organic acquisition as well, but
So
that's
what
like the
happens-
icing on the cake.
So what happens if people who are starting out, but they don't have money to run ads at the beginning?
Unfortunately, it's either save up some money from the job or do organic, or both. Like, do what it takes. I mean, you got to do what it takes.
I was going to say, we don't all have that issue, because not all of us get into entrepreneurship thinking that we're going to be able to build a multi-million-dollar business from nothing.
Yes.
Some of us have the foresight to understand that, okay, hey, in order to go into business, I'm going to actually need some capital. So instead of buying all this stupid shit off of my stupid shit I'm going to buy list, I'm going to save that money and I'm going to use that as the capital to start my business. So some of us actually have that thought process.
Right.
I love that.
So you have helped hundreds of fitness coaches and entrepreneurs to generate 6 and 7 figures in their business. So can you tell us about some of the mistakes that you see that the online coaches, the fitness coaches, that they make when it comes to sales and marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you like the character traits that I see over and over and over again from the coaches that are successful. There's like this flywheel of them asking a question inside of the group. And then once they get that feedback, the speed in which they execute on that feedback, and then they get that data from that action and they come back to the mentor once again with the result of that action. And then they just go again, get more feedback, take more action quicker, and they just go around and around and around the loop. I think that, again, it comes down to like people having expectations that are just completely misaligned from reality. I think that a lot of people have read $100 million offers by Hormozy, and they're just coming out with just these wild offers. 7-figure business in 6 weeks, and if you don't generate 7 figures, I'll come to your house and do your meal prep for 2 months. Just crazy stuff. And so I think, especially for new coaches as well, it's really like messing with their mindset of like what it takes to actually win, because it's not easy, and no one wants to hear that, because it's not sexy and it doesn't sell, but it's the truth. And I think if people actually knew the truth, then they can sort of anticipate the adversity and the challenges and the roadblocks, and they're more prepared for overcoming those problems, instead of thinking the journey is going to be linear, only to meet a roadblock and just freak out, saying to themselves, this isn't how it's supposed to be. And it's like, yeah, it is. It actually is. I mean, I've definitely seen people launch ads and it just kicks off straight away, but it's not always the case. So I always like to give coaches the worst case scenario, so that they know what to expect. Seems to put them in a much better position to win when they also account for potential pitfalls as well. The reason why people suck at sales when it comes to online fitness coaching is that they are unwilling. So obviously the first thing is they don't have a frame. So they position themselves on the call where the prospect will look at them and think to themselves, well, I just want to see if this is for me. When there needs to be the reverse psychology, because, imagine sitting at the doctor's office and the doctor goes, you need to see if you can afford this. It's like, man, you've got the problem. I'm the expert. You've got AIDS. I've got the solution for AIDS. So really positioning yourself as the expert, and then being willing to ask the really uncomfortable questions to get to the root cause of the problem, because I think a lot of prospects will jump onto the call wearing a mask where they feel very uncomfortable opening up about what they're actually going through. But, because emotion's the biggest thing that drives action, unless this coach is willing to dive into those deep emotions and pain points that person's experiencing and pull out that emotion, they're going to have a really hard time trying to pitch, $2,000, $3,000 for online fitness coaching, because the prospect is only going to perceive it as a weight loss program to just get healthier, as opposed to losing this weight because I've got low confidence and it's affecting my sex life with my partner. And if this doesn't change in the next 2 years, we're going to go through a divorce.
As we obviously don't have so much time left anymore, so to wrap it up, just let us know that what's next on your journey, what are you really excited about, and if you have any freebies that you want our audience to take advantage of, so just let us know all that.
Yes. So the next step inside of FitPro University, the whole idea of this university is to bring in experts to teach on certain topics around copywriting, sales, appointment setting, leadership, branding, everything I can possibly imagine that contributes to a successful online fitness business. I'm going to be bringing in experts to cover all those topics. We've already got 3 experts in that cover marketing, sales, and appointment setting, and copywriting, 4 experts. So we're looking to grow that company, even though we charge very little in comparison to a lot of these, 10 to 20K masterminds out there. We're still striving to provide a world-class experience where we're able to fulfill for these clients at scale, where they're not just another number, they're not just forgotten about, they're not just somebody who, we help them get excited before they jump into the program, then they're just forgotten about and pushed to the side. We truly want every single person to succeed. And I'm the person that's in the trenches still supporting my clients. They're not passed off to some client success director that doubles as a DJ on the weekends. They're dealing with me directly, which I prefer. But yes, I do have a free resource. It's a 5-day crash course, basically showing people from start to finish with their offer, building out a conversion mechanism, the walkthrough on the running the ads, the ad copy, launching the ads, tracking and managing KPIs, front and back end sales, front and back end client tracking. It's absolutely free. I've been told in the past that I could easily charge at least $2,000 for it. So I would love to give that to your audience. I know that they're going to love it. They're going to absolutely love it.
Where can we get that from?
It's actually pinned to the top of my profile, my personal profile.
That's right. Awesome, Dan. So thank you so much for spending your time with us today and sharing your insights, sharing your experience.
I'm assuming that your freebie can help generically for other people who aren't just wanting to grow a fitness business. I'm
absolutely
the can help anybody.
Right.
Absolutely.
Any online entrepreneurs. Yes. I enjoyed our session today. I hope you did too.
Likewise.
So yes, we will be in touch, and I wish you all the success for the future.
Thanks so much for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it. I really enjoyed this podcast.